And just like that, Nick Spencer's run on Amazing Spider-Man comes to an end with issue number 74, What Cost Victory? So, what do we think of issue 74 and Nick Spencer's run as a whole? Well, we're going to go ahead and get into all of that, and this is going to be a spoilery review, so if you haven't read the latest issue of Amazing Spider-Man and you plan to, then I would read it and then come back and check out the video after that. Otherwise, let's get on with things. So, issue number 74 is the conclusion of this whole Kindred saga that we have been reading about since Nick Spencer took over with the new issue number 1. Kindred has been his signature villain, and he has been building up to this final confrontation all this time over the last few years. 74 issues plus all of his countless tie-ins, so it's a lot more than that, and I am too lazy to go count them all. So, issue number 74 sees Spider-Man finally face off for the final battle against Kindred. And really, it's kind of two stories. You got the battle between him and Kindred, and then you have this whole deal with Doctor Strange dealing with Mephisto, trying to get to the bottom of what's going on with Mephisto and Peter Parker's soul. And as Doctor Strange sorts all this out, we find out that when Mephisto's not busy being the favorite fan theory as to which Marvel Plus villain he's the secret villain of, he spends most of his time messing with Peter Parker. Why does he mess with Peter Parker? Well, as Mephisto explains, Mephisto has had glimpses of the future. He's seen futures where he has overcome the heroes, where he's taken over the world, he's turned Earth into a hellscape, but in all of his visions, Peter Parker is always the one that somehow undoes him. We don't know how, they didn't get into that, but Peter Parker is something Mephisto actually fears. And since Mephisto's way isn't to necessarily go out and attack things directly, even though, from time to time he does, but that's not really his way. He is more of a manipulate things from the shadows type of a villain. So he has been messing and muddling in Peter Parker's life whenever he sees an opportunity to exert his influence and twist the plot a little bit to try to corrupt Peter Parker, because it's not enough to simply destroy or defeat Peter Parker. Only his total corruption, apparently, is what will save Mephisto from eventually being defeated by Spider-Man. So initially we thought Kindred was Spider-Man's friend Harry Osborn, kind of turned into this demon from hell named Kindred with all these millipedes, who has come back to take revenge on Spider-Man. And that's been what we've been going off this entire time. His main anger has been against Spider-Man and Norman Osborn, his father, which would make sense. But, as we learned, Kindred is actually two people. Kindred is Gabriel and Sarah Stacy, the refugees left over from the worst Spider-Man story of all time, where it was implied that, or not implied, basically said that Gwen Stacy had an affair with Norman Osborn. Out of that affair came two children, Gabriel and Sarah. Norman Osborn rapidly aged them and trained them to physical peak perfection to set them loose against Spider-Man to take their revenge. And I know what you're thinking, but at the end of that issue, didn't they end up dying an old age-related death? And that was the end of the two of them? Well, I know what you're thinking, that is what happened. But, as it turns out, Gabriel and Sarah were actually a plot device. They were a plan hatched by then still insane Harry Osborn as a plan to get revenge on Spider-Man and his father in a big double whammy type revenge scheme, all influenced by Mephisto. This was one of Mephisto's exerting influence moments. It turns out maybe Mephisto just exerts his influence and that's the result of Spider-Man's worst storylines. But anyway, it goes further to reveal that Norman Osborn had made a deal with Mephisto and basically traded his son Norman's soul for his power and wealth and influence. And that's kind of been the Osborn's family kind of quote unquote curse all these years, is that Norman Osborn is operating off of a full on deal with the devil, and Norman's son Harry has been corrupted and has been a pawn of Mephisto, I guess, roughly since the beginning. So that's quite a retcon we have there. It does, I guess, make a few things make sense, because, again, the Osborns are kind of this dark, cursed family, just full of tragedy and betrayal and death, and the fact that maybe it's revealed that a demon has kind of been behind their family's misfortune does make a bit of sense there. And so I'm sure you're wondering, since Harry Osborn also appears in this story, and he wasn't Kindred, as it turns out, it was Gabriel and Sarah, and Gabriel and Sarah are also back, having died, several hundred issues back. How is all this possible? Well, it's possible the way all dangling plot threads that make no sense are resolved in Spider-Man. Clones! Everyone's a clone. Yes, Gabriel and Sarah are clones. They have been cloned numerous times. They are cloned, they rapidly age, and they rapidly die. That is the life cycle of Sarah and Gabriel. Mephisto's influence is that he has put their rapid aging disease on bay as long as they do his bidding, and if they succeed in their task, they will get to lead normal lives. If they fail, which they ultimately do, that means they're going to rapidly age and die, which is the way that Kindred ends. They fail to corrupt Spider-Man. They try their best, but in the end, Spider-Man overcomes. His love for Mary Jane is strong. Harry Osborn sacrifices his life to save his father after his father tells him he loves him, and Harry forgives him. So the Norman or the Osborn family curse is kind of overcome through the power of love, and there we go. That's kind of the ending we get. On top of that, Peter and Mary Jane's love for each other is affirmed and restored, and the two of them are left a loving couple. So One More Day isn't so much undone as a lot of people were expecting it to be, as more as its influence is over and now it is pushed to the side. So probably the best ending you could hope for to get that awful storyline out of existence. So their marriage isn't restored, but their relationship is. The two of them kind of are back to the spot they were before One More Day, if that makes sense. And that's kind of where we leave Peter and MJ. So there are some backup stories at the end, including a story that's going to lead into Zeb Wells' run, which begins in a few weeks, which is going to bring Ben Reilly back to the fold. And everybody, I think, based on the comments of my Spider-Man videos, know how I feel about Ben Reilly. He's not my favorite character. I think he's a bit boring. We'll see what they're going to do with him. I'm not excited for that. Peter Parker Spider-Man to me. Anybody else is just not Spider-Man. I'm sorry for all you Miles Morales lovers. I like Miles. He's a cool character. But Pete's Spider-Man, and Miles Morales' new costume is not something I like. So, moving on. I said in my video that I did before when it was announced that Nick Spencer was leaving that his run is probably going to depend on the success of his signature villain, because that is Kindred is his thing. He went all in on Kindred since the beginning. He has been the driving force. He's been the villain in the shadows. So it's all going to come down to whether or not he was successful. We're going to get into that, but let's look at the other aspects of Nick Spencer's run and just see the kind of the merits and where it was strong and where it fell flat. As I said before, I think that his writing of Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery is probably the highlight of his run. I mean, he is pretty much undone, or at least explained away, two of Spider-Man's really big blemishes on his run, that being the Gabriel and Sarah story and the One More Day, both of which have been pretty much retconned into irrelevance. So that was strong. Also, his villain writing was very good. A lot of his villains were given unique personalities, given motivations that made them not so much just against Spider-Man. They are, they have their own reasons that they do things. They have their own little fraternities. They have their own rituals and everything else that they do, including getting together at a bar and having a Spider-Man trivia night, which Peter Parker lost, which I thought was very amusing. Yeah, that was definitely a high point. He did a lot with his kind of old stomping ground villains of the sinister foes of Spider-Man, which was Nick Spencer's original Spider-Man writing gig. They had a little bit more of a part than I would have liked, but I didn't think it was that terribly bad, except for Boomerang. I got really tired of seeing Boomerang in this comic. He used him a lot. I know Nick Spencer likes the character. He did a lot for this character as far as growth. And I will admit that by the end of his run, he did give Boomerang a good send-off or end to his story arc. Still wasn't my favorite part, but by the end, at least he kind of brought it back to a good ending, a good place. So I liked that. Then there was the issue of Spidey and Peter Parker kind of reconciling the personal life versus the alter ego. And this is where I still feel Nick Spencer fell a bit short. The Peter Parker stuff was really light in his run. There wasn't a lot of your normal Peter Parker storytelling. I mean, he had some of his usual problems. He had roommate issues. His roommate ended up being Boomerang. Again, more Boomerang. So he had to deal with the fact that he had a supervillain living with him that didn't know who he was. They adopted a weird multi-dimensional shrunken version of God, which I thought was just kind of dumb. Could have done without that entire storyline. Peter Parker kind of bounced around job to job, but he never really kind of had the struggles that you're used to with Peter Parker. That being said, the Peter and MJ's relationship, I like that he got them back together, but he got them back together in this weird kind of place where there just nothing comes from it storytelling-wise. There's no real trouble. There's no real angst. There's no real anything happening. It's like the two of them are in a happy place, which is great, but it from just a storytelling purpose, there just wasn't ever anything there. There was never a story that revolved around the relationship. There wasn't a moment where you thought that the relationship may be in danger, or there was never a point when one of them was even angry at the other. Everything just kind of clicked along swimmingly, and it was fine. MJ got herself in trouble. She got herself out of trouble. She didn't really need Peter. She had a life outside of him, which is great and cool. But I mean, somewhere there's got to be some friction. Otherwise, it's just not interesting. So I didn't think he was overly successful in writing Mary Jane's character. In the end, it was a little bit better. I thought the moments they had at the end was really well done, where it kind of put them, let it known to the writer that their relationship was back to center stage. I liked that. But overall, I thought MJ was a bit of kind of wasted in this run, not her best showing. J. Jonah Jameson, he was interesting in this. He kind of inherited this version of Jameson that's not really a foe to Spider-Man or a foil like he always had been all these years. They'd kind of buried their hatchet. It was odd. I don't accept that really. I don't know that Spider-Man and J. Jonah Jameson can ever bury that hatchet. And by the end, I think he kind of put them against each other, or back to where, Jameson just hates Spider-Man again, but I'm not quite sure. They also did the storyline where J. Jonah Jameson started a podcast, and that's like your grandfather starting a podcast. I had trouble even wrapping my head around the idea that J. Jonah Jameson would know what a podcast is. He's such an old-fashioned guy. That newspaper editor persona, that's just what I see with Jonah. I can't see him doing anything else. He's kind of a one-note character, but that one note is so great. So I kind of like just seeing him there. And then again, I think this book was a lot of fun under Spencer, which it hadn't been fun for a while. So the adventures were big, the villains were there. Their plans kind of range from earth-shattering to kind of silly. Spider-Man's sense of humor was front and center. I just enjoyed it. I liked reading his Spider-Man run. Every time an issue would come out, I wasn't always racing to read it first, but I always read it and I always put it down. And I would say 90% of the time really enjoyed what I had read. So in that, I am going to miss Nick Spencer for that, and I'm really afraid of losing that in the next writer's tenure. So that's going to bring us firmly along to Kindred. So, Kindred, again, was the signature villain, and I said before, and I stick to it, that whether or not Nick Spencer's run is successful is going to be based on if Kindred's any good. Was Kindred any good? That's a tough question to answer. So, let's break him down. He's introduced as kind of this demon from hell, and then it's revealed that he's really Harry Osborn. But then it's revealed that there's two Kindreds, and it's actually Gabriel and Sarah Stacy, and they were a product of a plan that Harry had launched before he originally died to get revenge on Peter Parker and Spider-Man, with a bit of influence from Mephisto. And as you can see, I'm having to add a lot of layers to explain this character. The more layers I have to add on to explain a character, in my opinion, the flimsier that character seems to get. So, I liked his look. They never really explained the deal with the millipedes. Where did he get them? if he's just a clone of Gabriel and Sarah, how does he have these millipedes and how does he control them? Where do they come from? Did they give him a power? Are they machines? Because it turned out he's not a demon, he's a clone. So that begs the question, because those were his signature weapon. He was able to stand against Spider-Man. Now, I understand that my recollection is correct, Gabriel was able to go up against Spider-Man because he had been infused with goblin serum. Not so much with Sarah, but Gabriel was, as I recall. So that would explain why he can physically handle him, but not why he had these centipedes. So I would have liked a little panel explaining maybe what the centipedes are, where they come from, and how he controls them. But we never get that. We don't. We just get kind of an explanation as to where Kindred comes from. And I have to admit, I'm having trouble being satisfied with what Kindred ended up being after all was revealed. I liked Kindred as a villain. I liked his look. I liked what he was doing. But in the end, I felt a bit unsatisfied with his reveal. And in the end, now that we've seen where it was going, it seems like he was a bit of a plot device that was just used to undo these bad parts of Spider-Man's history. The One More Day and the Gabriel and Sarah storylines, which is good. I'm glad these stories have been kind of pushed out or pushed to the side. But I don't know if we took the best road to get there, if that makes any sense. So in that sense, I found the conclusion a bit underwhelming because I found the payoff of Kindred wasn't quite there. So I'm sad to have to say that, but that's kind of where I am. And maybe you disagree, maybe you don't. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Kindred overall, where he stacks in the great pantheon of villains. I kind of sense that this character, if he ever comes back, is going to be kind of one of those guys. If it's always going to be somebody different in the Kindred costume, which maybe someday they'll explain the millipedes. I don't know. So now we're left with here's Spidey. Nick Spencer's gone. Where did he leave him? Well, I think he left Spidey. I think he leaves Spidey in a good place. Spider-Man's his rogues gallery is well established. The status quo is really there with the villains. Spider-Man's relationship with Mary Jane is front and center. They are together. They're happy. They're living together. MJ is working as an actress. Peter is, he's being Peter. I'm not sure what his job is at the moment. That's what he's doing. I think if you're going to judge it by does he leave the character better than he found him, I think he did. I think in that sense, Nick Spencer was very successful. I think he took Spider-Man. I think he gave him a bit of fresh air as far as getting some of those ugly spots, those stains off of his record, giving us some fun along the way, giving us a villain that, while his ending was a bit anticlimactic and maybe a little unsatisfying, I think overall the journey with this villain has been a lot of fun. So I think overall Nick Spencer's run was a success. Not perfect, but successful. He got us to the end of our journey and he left us in a place where I would have liked to have seen more. So, and I think as a writer, that's about as good a job as you can do without just being excellent. How could this have been done better? I don't know. I think maybe Kindred needed a little bit more of a concise storyline. May have been a bit too big to try to take on Gabriel and Sarah and One More Day in one big storyline like that. That ended up proving to be a bit much. So again, I'm glad he did it. I just don't know that the road he took to get us there was the best. So anyway, that's my take on Spider-Man 74 and Nick Spencer's run on Amazing Spider-Man. So obviously, comments below. What did you think of Nick Spencer's run? Successful, unsuccessful? Do you think he left Peter in a better place than he found him? Are you looking forward to what's to come with Zeb Wells and Ben Reilly and us trudging back into that clone territory? Let me know in the comments below. While you're down there, obviously, like the video, please. Helps me kind of move up the the algorithm of YouTube. And if you're not already a subscriber, I would love to have you. If you want to go ahead and hit that subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it. The channel's been growing a lot lately, and I appreciate you guys a lot for that. And I'm going to leave it there. So I hope you guys have a great day. And of course, we're going to be talking about Inferno. So that video will be coming soon, and I will talk to you then. Bye.